Well, it's up to you. So, questions, contributions to the two speakers? Go on.
Sorry. It's sort of a bit technical. You answered sort of half of it about the water pollution. But what I wanted to know was they sort of pump all this water and sand through the shale gas. Well, do they get the water on site, or do they have to bring it in from somewhere else? And if so, where?
They're bringing it in tankers.
And what happens to the place they brought it from? Is it seawater? Is it fresh water?
Well, it's fresh water as far as we know.
You can use seawater.
Yeah.
Can you?
Yeah. But one of the things you have to ask is, where is it coming from and where is it going to? Because if it's coming out of the ground, it's coming out of people's fresh water supply.
Yeah.
So if it's reducing the water table, because what they do, you know, we get water from like Wales that we get from Lake District. If that runs down because it's hot, they top it up with artesian well water. Whatever. We can imagine if you've got billions of gallons being abstracted from wherever, it's coming off somebody, and then were they disposing of it?
Well, that's basically what I wanted to do.
Sometimes there are some photographs on the web of tankers trying to dump it where, you know, just sort of let it spill out onto the roadway when they think nobody's looking.
So how did this idea of fracking, I mean, who did the research? How did it develop? Who conceived the idea in the first place and why?
Well, interesting is that Americans developed it in the 1930s. But I was talking to somebody just this weekend, and Albert Speer, you remember Albert Speer, who was, and he said you should call it fracking, you should call it gassy gas. Because during the war, as a result of losing, you know, Romanian oil fields and all that, Albert Speer toyed with Germans started fracking off in the Third Reich. So it's been going around a long time, but as the Exxon and people who, you know, some of these top CEOs will tell you, it's a lot different technology now than what it was in 13. In fact, they're saying it's so precise now, the drilling techniques, that, for example, if this was underground, 3,000 foot underground, on a layer of shale, they could drill through that orange can. You know, they could be that accurate.
Yeah.
Come around the back then? Sorry.
Yeah, just a few things. Richard Atkinson, IS Network in Cheshire West Left Lindsay. So we've been running an anti-fracking campaign for 6 months now, which Left Lindsay initiated at a meeting in Chester, which Stephen didn't attend, supposed to speak. We did it anyway. And we've got a camp now at Upton in anticipation of thing. And we also have a threat of the nightmare option from the range of techniques that people have talked about. We've got coal bed methane, we've got fracking, we've got the nightmare option in the D and other estuaries around the country. We've got coal bed gas, underground coal gasification, which will have to burn Stalin gas because it's a technique that was only ever used in Stalin's Russia in the 1930s. That's been disastrous ever since. It's an absolutely crazy idea. You get a scene of coal underground and set fire to it. You turn it to coke and get the gas off. Most people can see problems with that. It might be an issue there, you know, setting fire to coal underground. But the government have licensed it. That's the point. Is that the position of the British state, they have licensed it and approved it and passed by the public health bodies, by the Environment Agency. All these people have passed it. The DACC have passed it. Just as they've issued licenses to most of the country, as Stephen pointed out, they've issued what do they call pedals, petroleum exploration development licenses, now cover most of the country from the north, and the underground coal gasification covers most of the estuaries in the area. I endorse what everyone says about working together with camps and working with local people and getting them to working together, which I've not found a problem, to be honest. The people on camps are dependent on the local community anyway, so they're quite willing to work with local communities, and local communities, you get some people saying, well, they're all on benefits, but that's okay, it leads on political other arguments about nature of benefits. There are, he was saying we're short of national coordination. I agree, I endorse the nice idea Stephen had for getting protests together, but there is some national coordination going through the camp network. There's the National Anti-Fraction Action Camp between the 14th and 20th of August, which they were planning at Chester last weekend. but the venue is not certain yet. But last August they did it in Balcombe. That's when they had thousands of people at Balcombe, so they're looking for thousands of people somewhere else again. A site like that. And also next week there were a series of debates organised, formal debates organised, people were called in to talk about fracking in Glasgow, Nottingham, Manchester, Swansea and London, which I've got the dates for if you want to, so plenty of activity. What we found is that as soon as you raise the issue, people turn up and people flood in, and all sorts of people who are already very well informed will flood and join any networks, any Facebook groups, and you get a brilliant network of activists. I mean, we took an initiative in the Left Units in Chester to get an initiative. We started with a meeting of 28. Since then, there are Facebook groups and there have been thousands. There have been half a dozen local meetings with hundreds of people in attendance, getting the message out, and Gasland showings, showing the 2 Gasland films. No problem, the people are there, and if given the vacancy, they will think what's missing perhaps is any hard grasp of the politics involved, and how hard the politics are going to be. People think it's going to be. I think people think it's winning too easily at this stage. I think there's a lot of money in this industry, and they're not going to back off on it quickly. And they will come back and come back and come back, as I think they will at Bentley, because of all the riches to be made from this thing. So I think it raises questions of democracy in the state, which socialists ought to be able to answer, revolutionary socialists ought to be able to come up with answers to. I mean, for instance, in our area, we've got a Tory local council, which is trying to position itself at the forefront of the fracking. It sent more councillors to a recent fracking conference in the National Exhibition Centre in Birmingham than any other council in the country. Sent 8 councillors there to talk to the fracking industry, and they're strictly pro-fracking. They're being cautious, though. They're being cautious because they're aware that as soon as the issue is raised, there will be a groundswell of opposition to it. You can say that reliably. There will always be a groundswell of opposition to it. It's fairly easy to raise the arguments against in opposition to fracking, especially when they do nonsense propositions like underground coal gasification to go along with it. So it's very easy to win the arguments, but I don't think they're going to go away just because you win the arguments. They're going to come back and fight them back and have another go. So I think it's vital that we get involved, and that revolutions in particular are involved there with no illusions in whether state and industry will collaborate on this to drive it forward.
Dave Kellaway, Socialist Resistance. I just wanted to comment something about the Labour Party and how they responded. There must be some of the Labour Party activists who maybe are opposed to fracking or not. I don't know, I haven't read too much about it. But in Manchester and other places, I mean, have the Labour Party been split, or are they all totally behind the fracking, or and what's the national position of the party?
I'll take a couple of other people before you can speak about.
Well, mine's just a question, because I want to know what are the forms of energy that are being proposed in the 1 million climate jobs, whatever it is. What's the alternative that people are proposing?
Absolutely. Okay, yeah, Eva and then Steve, yeah. I'll say a couple of things.
Right, quickly. Forms of energy. I think that there are numerous clean energy methods that can be developed. Wind energy, solar energy. One of the things that has been proposed is that a very small fraction of the Sahara Desert could be covered with solar panels, and given a investment in a new grid system for Europe, it could supply the whole of Europe on a very small percentage of the Sahara Desert sunshine. So basically, we're looking at wave energy, wind energy, that sort of thing, which I think could be developed. The thing is, of course, that the tax breaks are given to the frackers, and so the other things are marginalised. They do need development, but I think that they could be made into big things. So I think that, I don't know if Steve will add something to that. What was the other question?
The Labour Party.
I've not seen much in the way of a Labour Party presence. Maybe, I mean, they've certainly not made any public announcements that I'm aware of. Some Labour Party members may be with us, but their Labour Party membership isn't the most important thing about them. Steve, to tell you the truth, I can't really make a sensible answer to that question, so I'm going to leave it to Steve.
Well, I want some reverse way around then. In terms of the Labour Party, I mean, at Barton Moss, for example, we have had speakers from the Labour Party, councillors, even in Lancashire, who were totally against fracking, absolutely got a good group of people around them on Lancashire County Council, totally opposed to it. We've also got, I mean, Baker's Union, for example, affiliated to the Labour Party, was the first union in Britain to come out against fracking. They support 1 million climate, you know, they support exactly what I've been pushing. They are for committing the Labour Party to that. Unite the Union, which is Union Army, it's got policy against fracking, it's got policy to support 1 million climate jobs. Even the TUC's got policy opposed to fracking. A lot of unions are potentially in a position there to put pressure on Labour. We've lobbied our own MP in a marginal constituency. I mean, she was shocked how many people turned up to the meeting when we went talking to her. She did say, for example, she'd asked questions about where's the water going to be disposed of and where's it coming from. And she also agreed to take up, you know, why are Greater Manchester Police arresting all these people and then they're all getting off? Or the charges are being dropped, and why are they, you know, beating people up or whatever, and why they say we've been firing flares at helicopters and things like that, which, you know, we think, we got accused of being,
It was a lie.
Firing a flare at a helicopter, police helicopter. So, this, and Lisa Nandy, for example, in Wigan, the interesting one there, the constituency Labour Party has voted and is totally against fracking, but she supports fracking. The situation with Labour Party, my knowledge is, or my understanding is that at leadership level, they're not committed one way or the other, and they more or less, rather than looking at the environmental impacts and thinking, oh, we could create a million jobs here, well, maybe that might get us a few votes at election. They're thinking, how much tax can we raise off fracking as an industry and help us plug this deficit that exists, you know, in the public accounts. So there's a bit more like pragmatic, you know, how much money might we raise. And I think that's why I think this bill is important when through Parliament, puts much pressure on them, because I think it's not impossible that we can possibly commit Labour to it. In terms of other forms of energy, it's not just about other forms of renewable energy, it's also about reducing the amount of energy that we need. I mean, one of the things the industry keeps saying is, you know, if we bring this gas online, people's gas bills will come down. Well, there's no, even Ed Davies said there's no guarantee of that. And Fallon, I think, he said that as well. I'll tell you what will bring people's gas and electric bills down, though, insulating the roads better than what they're doing at the moment. And one of the things that the 1 million climate jobs thing is, said we can have a massive programme, put about 250,000 people back to work in this country, better insulating people's homes. And also combining forms of renewable energies together, for example, like put solar panel on the roof, get that power, ground source heat pump or something like that. Key to it ultimately is better insulation. Redesigning industrial process. The guy in Barcelona's just developed, an architect, he's just developed this big marble on top of his hotel, and it's concentrated solar power. It basically tracks the sun as it goes through the sky. And it's something like, I think it's something 30 times more efficient than solar panels that we've got now. There've also these schemes in Spain, where obviously the sun shines a lot, concentrated solar panels where they've got mirrors tracking the sun as it goes through the sky and bouncing off a pillar which has got a big lump of molten salt in it that it eats up and retains heat, so that even when it's dark, it can still generate electricity when it's dark. So there's loads of things like, you know, we're surrounded by some seas with the biggest tides in the world. Well, I remember watching Blue Peter in the 60s when they were talking about salmon barrage, and you know, and 40 years on we haven't got one, you know.
if I could just come from the chair, just to continue on that. I mean, insulating, we lose about a third of the energy by insulating housing, right, and buildings. So if we actually insulated properly buildings, that would be a considerable amount of energy not consumed and not heating the sky and reducing bills. And when people tell you, oh, we're going to have a wind farm over there that reduced your bills, it doesn't actually, because it actually is the wind farms, the seven tidal dam are there to allow you to continue to consume as much as you're consuming now, and if not more, because you're buying more electronic goods and so on and so forth. The other thing is public transport. Reducing car usage with free public transport in towns. It does exist already in some cities in Europe, right? And cheap intercity travel. Just one disagreement I have with Eva about this idea of capturing solar energy in Sahara Desert or parts of it and moving it to Europe. I think we've got to move away from mega projects. I think solar panels, renewable energies on locally produced, local installations on your individual buildings and so on and so forth is a much more energy efficient way of actually producing and consuming energy where it's needed. And because these mega projects mean mega infrastructure. Plus, loss of energy in the transfer from one bit of Europe to another, and so on and so forth. So I would just say those things. But and people say, well, we can't insulate every building in Britain. I said, why not? Right? It's a question of subsidising it. We subsidise the nuclear energy, we subsidise the car industry, we subsidise the weapons industry. So why not subsidise something which is really useful for the planet, absolutely necessary for the planet, create jobs and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I was just going to tell you about a very successful do we had in Manchester. We had a two-session thing. With a morning session was a sort of fairly conventional meeting on fracking and climate change. Which we thought was something that needed emphasising. And in the afternoon, because the council elections and the European elections were looming, we had a hustings. And that was very, very successful. It was very, very well attended. There wasn't an available chair in the room. And in fact, I have to report that both the Labour and the Lib Dem people that came to answer, to be the panel on the hustings panel, said more or less the same line: I'm against fracking, but my party isn't. And so they were attacked for that quite successfully. But it was a bit of a cop-out. That they sort of, well, I'm good, but I can't speak for my party, which we thought was very poor. In fact, we made big efforts to get absolutely all the parties represented, including the Tory party, and we had. And I think it would have been a much more boring meeting if we hadn't had the Tory, because of course he was the one that everybody threw questions and abuse at. And so the thing was very, very lively, and I suspect with elections coming up next year could be repeated in a whole number of places.
Yeah, come right at the back there. Yeah, you with the beard. Yeah.
Hi. I don't know if it's off topic, but presently people are talking about things like the transatlantic trade investment partnership, free trade agreements being drawn up that would incorporate investor-state dispute settlement mechanisms, which would make it under mechanisms like that, say Canadian cognizant that ban fracking are being sued by Canadian companies because of NAFTA, North American free trade stuff. And that's all being done now. That's all being negotiated now between Europe and America. And if that went through, and people are talking about trying to get through, they talk about the end of this year or next year, that would make the right to frack potentially enshrined in international law. I'm just wondering how come up politically, motivating people, organising people. Are you aware of any interest in that, or any sense of urgency about that?
There's somebody else with their hand up? Yeah. Yeah.
Going back to what you were saying about, this is more answering a bit of the question, what you were saying about the alternative options. I know in Bolcom at the moment they're starting up a thing where they're trying to start a solar village in the place of the fracking village essentially, and it's with 1010. And I don't know if maybe more people with fracking groups have thought about this and kind of looked at the way in which you can transition your kind of current power dynamics into creating maybe a democratically run community energy project and kind of bring energy back into the community. And then also, I just had a question about whether have you thought beyond kind of the fracking process, and if you do find gas, what the next stage is and how this is going to provide massive implications for the wider community in terms of you've got to lay gas pipes in order to get this fracking gas out to wherever it's got to go, and then you're going to need far more infrastructure development. And then you thought about kind of bringing that into the campaign. And then just one more thing, I just want to hear a bit more about kind of the implications of the police within the Greater Manchester campaign, because I think in the main media it hasn't really been portrayed as much as it should, because you have met a lot of resistance from the police and they have acted kind of, not, I would say not legally. Would you be able to kind of comment more on what happened and kind of, provide us more analysis?
I'm not sure, was that about the police?
Yeah,
Yes.
how,
Sorry, about the police and what they've been doing to you during the campaign and how they've been acting quite badly.
Stephen, have you?
Yeah, well, I'll check. TTIP thing, right, at the moment, interest is suddenly picking up about it, right? You're right, it's implications on fracking, and it basically will more easily enable fracking. Also, it will more easily enable privatisation at NHS. A good place, therefore, link up them campaigns in opposing it. My understanding is the anti-fracking movement has already sussed that one out and they're already doing stuff. So that's a good thing. I think there'll be a big campaign on TTIP, which is just about the Great Manchester TC. There's a meeting next week, even in case you didn't know in Manchester about TTIP. The thing about community projects, up in Banks last year, which was one of the first drill sites that Quadrilla did, the KM did some test drilling. We had a camp up there, there was a bit of a campaign, and then they moved away. The people up there were like thinking, well, we can't be going down to Bolcom every week, and that's what we're doing. And one of the things that they have agreed to do, or rather a number of the people in that group, and it was as a result of stuff we were suggesting, is they've done exactly what you said about promoting cooperative community renewable energy, and say, look, we don't need fracking, this is what we should be doing. And instead of talking on a theoretical level, saying this will save this, actually going and doing it. So they've gone to a local school. We've put them in touch with an expert, this guy called Kevin Free, who does this project. And one of the things he's trying to do is he should do like a community share flotation, where, for £100 or whatever, you can buy a share in the project. We've even tried to advise them about how you could possibly even get credit union to assist people who aren't necessarily in a good place investing in it to invest in it as well. Using that also to local councils, saying, well, why aren't you doing this everywhere? Because the capital isn't coming from you borrowing money or from you going to government and begging money. You're raising it in your own communities, and on the present feed-in tariff, it's a good investment at 7% return for people who are putting money in. You're providing a science project for your kids at school. You're reducing the amount of electricity that the local authority has to pay for the school. And you fight climate change. You think, well, what box does that not tick? And we need to be doing more of that. I think we will gain more political support. People, I might ask them for Left Unity by promoting a few of them projects and people seeing them work and people thinking, yeah, why are we doing this in every school, every public building? It's not rocket science, is it? The thing about the police, I mean, with the police now, It's a big issue. I mean, Manchester TUC have agreed to take it up. Manchester Trades Council in particular said they're going to pursue this. And I know that Simon Poot, who is the solicitors at Robert Lazarge, who's represented most of the people who've been charged in relating to Bart Moss. You know, he is taking it up with the European Court of Human Rights. He's after taking it up with the United Nations, because out of something like, I don't know, so far about 70 people who've been charged in court, apart from first person who was up, who represented himself, so which is probably a good reason why you shouldn't ever represent yourself. The other 74, all the charges have been dropped. And you think, well, how can you justify how much police time, money, and whatever, and Crown Prosecution Services gone on to all this? And they've been more or less just, you know, no charge to answer. So that's going to be a running story. It's a scandal. It's a scandal.
Yeah, the behaviour of the police has been sort of a fairly steady rumble of please move along, you know, and pushing everybody along the road. There's the lorries line up on a major road, and there's a little lane which has been actually designated a public footpath for some reason, but it is a proper road, although small, and it's about half a mile. And we've managed to make them take an hour and a half, easily, to travel that half a mile, morning in, morning out. In fact, at the end of the thing, they said that they were a month behind the schedule when they'd finished drilling their holes. So I reckon that was our month. But the police behaviour is on the whole, because there are loads of them. I mean, I think of a morning, there probably are more police than there are protectors. But with eruptions of flurries of things where people have actually managed to break arms, to scrape cheeks along the ground, get quite badly hurt. And I think there were stories for what happened to people that were arrested and left in the cells in a bad condition. So that it was a mixture of sort of the image of the police that they like to present themselves, with occasional eruptions of